The governor of the US state of Hawaii says more than 1,000 people are still unaccounted for after the Maui fire disaster. So far, 99 people are confirmed dead. But sniffer dogs have only covered about a quarter of the devastated town of Lahaina. Many describe the scene as a war zone.
Oh my gosh.
Stuck in traffic as they tried to escape Maui's deadly wildfires.
It's gonna get to the church. Oh my gosh, it's gonna fall on us.
Akane Siva recorded these scenes on her phone as she fled with her family from their home in Lahaina.
We're at a dead end and we're just standing there. We have our backs to this building and we're looking at each other and we're like, you know, my son was like, oh, Mom, is this it? And I mean, what do you tell your kids? You know, and I told my kids, you know, if it is, my husband told him if it is, you know, thank you, Lord.
Over 2,000 buildings were damaged or destroyed as the fire tore through the historic town. Rescue and relief operations have intensified on Maui Island to supply survivors with food, water and shelter, with thousands left homeless. While teams search through burnt-out buildings and cars for those who didn't make it. Hawaii's governor says the death toll is likely to rise.
Families will come together, but there's a lot of loss here, and I think we're going to see significantly higher numbers in the coming days as our professionals from FEMA and Maui Fire, police do their job. We're proud of them for doing their job. It's very hard for them too because they knew and loved these neighbors.
The US's deadliest wildfires in more than a century have fueled criticism that the inaction of authorities contributed to the scale of the disaster, with many survivors saying they received no warnings. Akane Siva and her family are now safe and staying in a shelter. They hope that Lahaina is able to rebuild and return to the town and community it was before the flames hit.
DW's Conchi Moya is on the Hawaiian island of Maui. It's been almost 1 week since the fires struck. How much more of the island do emergency teams have to scour?
Yeah, they've searched about 25% of the area, and they were saying that they hope by the weekend they would have searched about 85 to 90% of the area. But they pointed out that it's going to take time and patience because it's not only Lahaina that burned, but there are also fires still going on in Kula and other parts of the island that are more inaccessible. So once they've done that and they want to identify all victims, that's phase 0. They will proceed to phase 1, which is they will allow the residents to go back to return to their properties.
Now, I know you mentioned yesterday authorities weren't keen on talking about this, but is it any clearer what went wrong with Maui's early warning system?
No, actually, they still refuse to get into detail about the warning systems, but they do stress out that the winds were very strong and spreading rapidly. What happened was more than 400 poles went down, which means we don't know if that may have caused the fire. There's an investigation being launched also into the Hawaiian Electric Company, but that also caused that the other systems of alert failed. Like people didn't get notifications through their phone because of that. So, and they also pointed out there's an ongoing conflict with the water that's been going on for decades. They pointed out firefighters had not enough water to fight the fires, and that's been going on for decades, so they are trying to find a solution for that.
Well, the fact is thousands of people are now homeless. What support are you seeing them actually get from authorities there?
Well, here on the ground, what I've seen myself, I've been today to the Malea Harbor, is that people are volunteering in any way they can and bringing supplies, bringing fuel, bringing food and water to especially to the Lahaina area, and that's being coordinated by the county. The government has also launched a program and a database where people who need housing can find people who can provide housing. They're going to get benefits also from the state, and they will. The state will provide aid for rental. They have like about 500 rooms already ready for residents, and other 500 rooms are also ready for people who are here fighting the fire and for first responders.
DW's
There's also, if I may say...
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to talk about one main concern and very important thing is that people are concerned about what's going to happen to their properties. So the governor, Josh Green, said that he's going to try and enforce a moratorium on the sale of land. So to make sure that nobody outside of the state buys these properties, because people here, locals, are really scared that big investors from the mainland could buy the land because allowed by federal laws and rebuild the area of Lahaina to their own benefit.
Okay, interesting development in that story. DW's Conchi Moya for us in Hawaii. Thank you so much for your reporting.
Thank you.
Well, I'm joined again tonight by journalist Naka Nathaniel in Hawaii. Naka, it's good to see you. You and I, we spoke last on Friday when the world was realizing that this wildfire on Maui had been much worse than first thought. And here we are on Monday, and that seems like a big understatement, doesn't it?
It really does, Brent. You know, the way that this has developed was the initial reports were 6 dead. Then it jumped to 36, and now it's jumped up it's close to 100. And as you reported earlier, the governor, Josh Green, says there's going to be scores every single day through the rest of this week. This is just such a catastrophe.
And there may be more than 100 people, bodies buried in the ashes and the soot just in the town of Lahaina. What are you hearing about search efforts, and what are families, relatives of the missing, what are they being told about these efforts?
Yeah, that's one of the things that's really come into the fore is that this is no longer a search and rescue. This is purely a search. And the state has put out that if you are still looking for your loved ones, the best thing you can do right now is to give DNA samples. And it's taking a long time. Maui is an island. We are not close to, driving distance to anything. And so everything is going to have to be airlifted, either to the continental United States or to Oahu for identification.
Firefighters there on Maui, they've said that their initial response to the fires was made that much slower due to fallen power lines. Now, there are videos on social media that purport to show flames near those high voltage power poles. What are you hearing about the connection between, the power company and the fires?
This is one of the most disappointing things is that lessons that we know from other places weren't applied here. California has a very strict system of they will shut the power down on those grids if there's high winds. That did not happen here. It looks like most of the fires were started by downed power lines. And given the way that, our summers work is that, we have a lot of grasses that grow very, very quickly during the spring seasons, and they dry out during the summer. And so it was just a tinderbox. And one of the things that's really the biggest issue here is that Maui changed dramatically over the last 200 years. The amount of grazing and then the bombings that happened in a nearby island called Kaho'olawe really denuded a lot of this landscape. So the natural defenses that the island would have had against wildfire weren't in existence. And then when you compound that by not having water in the pipes to feed the fire hydrants, this was just an amazing calamity.
Yeah, I want to pick up on that. Firefighters have said that they could have perhaps fought the blazes more effectively, but when they connected their hoses to the hydrants, they said sometimes there was no water pressure.
Yes, and the other part too that has developed is not only was there not any pressure inside the pipes, but many of the fires that they thought that they had quenched, that were out, actually weren't, because the winds were so heavy here that past week. And then that's what whipped up a lot of they thought they had the problem solved, but many of those fires came back up, and that's really what hit the town of Lahaina.
And so here we are. It's August. You know, people, particularly from the west coast of the United States, they love to get away. They love to go to Hawaii. Talk to me about tourism on Maui. I want to ask you, someone who grew up in Hawaii, when and where is too much here? Are people acknowledging that this piece of paradise is now, you know, the scene of mass death?
Right, right. This is one of the things, is that before the pandemic, Hawaii would get about 10 million visitors a year. And this was a number that was only increasing. And during the pandemic, most of the state was shut down, and it gave the land and the people a chance to relax and restore themselves. And so we learned that without visitors here, the land really is and something that was needed. We've seen this in other places, Venice, and Hawaii really, embraced that opportunity to relax. However, so much of the economy here is based on tourism, and but people found another way to exist. They thought outside of the box as far as being able to have a day-to-day existence. And now, after these fires, just as you said, this is a place of mass death. Is Maui going to be the paradise? Can people, compartmentalize that? I don't think so. I think that Maui is really going to be in a dire place, much as, other places that have suffered disasters in Hawaii, like Hilo and Kauai.
Yeah, but it's kind of a catch-22 situation, isn't it? I mean, you want to show respect to the humanity of the situation and the lives that were lost. At the same time, you know that a lot of people on the islands, they depend on tourism for their daily bread. I mean, you have to balance these. Is that going to be done successfully?
So those discussions were already in place. There were lessons that were learned, from the pandemic, things that they wanted to apply, especially when it comes to sustainable, responsible tourism. And they were trying to dig a little bit deeper into the way that, Hawaii was positioned. It was not a place for you to come and sip Mai Tais and sit on the beach the entire time, that there was the broader culture, the way that, Hawaiians used to live on the land. That was the message that we wanted tourists to be able to understand and to learn and hopefully take back with them. Hawaii really would like to be one of the leaders in what it means to be a sustainable environment in the 21st century. And sadly, so many of those lessons that were starting to be learned weren't able to be applied before this disaster struck in Maui.
Journalist Naka Nathaniel joining us tonight from Hawaii. Naka, it's good to see you again. Appreciate you taking the time to talk with us again. Thank you.
Mahalo, Brent. Aloha.